All right. Yeah. So, all right, let's start off with the first question. I'm gonna hit you with the big one, just like I did Greg the other week. Um, what was the biggest mistake of your career, in your opinion?
I mean, honestly,
There's always a long pause after that one. They have to scour the whole
I
career.
mean, I'm sure that most fighters have a lot of mistakes accrued amongst like your entire career, and then you can answer it on like a micro level about like what happened in a fight, or on like a macro level about like career trajectory and stuff. I mean, honestly, it's pretty easy for me to answer. I started fighting super late, but it's not because I didn't start training, right? Like I was boxing and doing jujitsu when I was in college, so like 18, 19 years old.
Where did you go to college,
But
real quick?
you said where?
Yeah, where?
University of California, Davis.
That's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
Northern California.
He's a Cali boy. Got it.
Sure. Uh so like I was boxing. I mean, I did karate and stuff when I was a kid too. So it's not like I didn't have martial arts experience, and it's not like I didn't know that I wanted to fight either. Because like I remember telling my roommate one time that like as sort of a bucket list thing, I was going to have at least one professional fight, like it's at some point in my life. And I told him that after I had been doing jujitsu for like 2 weeks.
Did you know that
So
was gonna take? Like you said, professional. Like most people just say fight. They don't know that there's tiers to it. Did you know just professional? What was in your mind? Like be on TV or
no, just like being able to check the tier of professional fighter, right? Because I had watched the UFC prior to starting training. That's what made me start training was or get back into training anyway. It made me start jujitsu was like watching MMA and watching the UFC. So I was already super into MMA. So then I started Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then like 2 weeks into it, I was already talking about like just like I said, just as a bucket list thing, being like, I'm gonna do at least one professional level fight in my
you
life.
caught the
So
bug?
yeah. Yeah, one right away, pretty much right away. Honestly, like I said, that was like within 2 weeks of starting just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then I started boxing and stuff. But uh, as far as like taking steps to actually make that happen, I think that I just waited too long. Like the environment that I was training in, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym I was training in was just a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym. It was like all hobbyists, older guys in their 30s and 40s. No one going down like the professional fighter route. So I just wasn't really being pushed in that direction, and I wasn't taking steps on my own to make that happen like I could have been.
And
So
you were early 20s at the time?
yeah, so like I started training in like 2009, and then I got my purple belt probably like 2013 or something, and this was all basically at this point in the back of my mind knowing like yeah, I want to do a professional fight at some point, like I said this and it's on my bucket list, but still not really taking steps to make that happen other than just like going to jiu-jitsu a lot and going to jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff. So I did compete in jiu-jitsu. So I mean, I guess that's one area where I sort of like made advances towards it. But in terms of learning Muay Thai, uh, that wasn't really happening. And then I boxed for a while on the college club team, but I ended up injuring my knee and then sort of stepping away from boxing and just focusing on jujitsu after the knee injury. So I never really got back into boxing after that. Um, and so then it wasn't till like 2014 when I started even training Muay Thai in the first place. And then I moved to Thailand. But at this point I was already 24, right? So I didn't really even start taking steps like I needed to
like
until I was already
like
24.
smash 'em type of fighting, like pure contact, like damage.
Right,
Like
and that's a whole other aspect, right? Than just being competitive. Like jujitsu is there's a competitive and there's a physical and there's an aggressive aspect to it, but like fighting is
damage.
different because like you said, you're taking damage. You like have to harden your body, and that's a process that takes time because you have to go through the little injuries. Like continuously to build up that toughness of your body.
And it also
So
affects the competition as far as like, when you're in a fight and you get rocked with, a really hard kick and you feel like your bone may have just cracked and you think in your head, should I continue? This might affect me forever. Like that arm might shatter after one more. So then you have to, all in a split second, decide, should I keep going? Like those kinds of situations don't exactly happen in a jiu-jitsu match, but
right.
it's both competitive, just in different forms. You have different, you know, things to worry about and feelings to, just compress.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and so, but basically that's why I moved to Thailand at that point. But
You just
it
got up
was
and was just, let's see that I need to know some sort of story in there of, all right, I wanna progress, I guess, in the MMA world, right? Is that what you were thinking at the time? So you started doing Muay Thai.
basically like I had always had this goal in the back of my mind. I was doing a lot of jujitsu, but I wasn't really taking true steps to make it happen. So after I graduated, I was working doing IT recruiting, and I was pretty miserable doing that job. I just hated it. But I had a roommate at the time who actually introduced me to Muay Thai and introduced me. He hadn't trained it, but
To
he
a
was like
gym?
a fan of it. He
Oh,
knew of Muay Thai, and he was a college football player, so super athletic dude. He like taught me how to diet properly and like taught me about physical training to like actually build the athletic side. Uh, and then he also introduced me to Muay Thai. He like showed me Danny Bill. That was his favorite fighter.
Danny
And
Bill.
then yeah, like the at one, like I always recommend Danny Bill to people from a technical standpoint. Like his technique and his timing is just
How did you
pretty amazing.
Was YouTube a thing back then? Like
Yeah, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube was a thing, man. It
not all
was
the
like
breakdowns and everything. It was just, highlight reels of fighters and
that's mostly what it was. I don't remember seeing breakdowns at all back then. But
yeah.
there was a lot of Danny Bill highlight videos. And if you go look like Google Danny Bill highlight video, a lot of them are probably from like 8, 10 years ago, and those are like probably the same ones I was watching back then.
All right, so you would watch some Danny Bill, and still, like even 10 years in, there's still plenty of people that have never taken the jump to Thailand. But where did that thought come from? I'm just gonna dive right in.
I mean, it was partially just because I had started so late. I was like, it's at this point, it's now or never, right? Like, if I don't make a drastic leap to learn, like I've been learning all this jujitsu, but I need to learn how to strike like rapidly. So I need to immerse myself in striking if it's going to happen. And then the other aspect of it was I just didn't like my job, so I was kind of in this transitionary phase where I was trying to figure out like what I actually even wanted to do with my life. So I knew that I didn't want to be working in that job anymore. So like natural reaction for me was sort of like to just run away from that job and like run towards something that I felt was more positive and that I actually liked dedicating energy to. So I basically it was a combination of like knowing that I was running out of time if I actually ever wanted to make this a reality, and then also just like things weren't going that well on the other side of my life, so it wasn't like there had a whole lot of stuff like holding me back from taking such a massive leap like that.
So
So
everything kind of aligned to situate for it.
yeah, exactly. But like I said, if in retrospect, right? Like I would have probably taken that same type of a leap when maybe like in the transition year before I went off to college or something, right? When I was a bit younger, could have started that body hardening process earlier, that mental hardening process earlier, got that striking background, came back and started doing amateur fights while I was going through college, while I was like 21, 22, right? I didn't have my first amateur MMA fight until I was 27 probably. So obviously like I did I'm not disappointed with anything I did in my fight career. Like I'm very proud of all, and like I'm happy with the way things turned out. But obviously in retrospect, if I would have had other fighters around me who could have like guided my path a little bit better, I would have started fighting much earlier. And part of that was also just because like when I was young I just never really felt ready. But as I got older and I realized like you never really feel ready. It's just something that you have to do. You sign up for the fight and do it. And
Right.
generally, like you're never gonna feel ready for
You're
it.
trying to, you know, think of scenarios that are impossible to contemplate to begin with, so you're never truly ready, I don't think, you know.
Right.
Um but yeah, so it's also a bit of an exposure thing, I guess. So you said your friend introduced you to Muay Thai. I mean, but you knew about MMA before that, but
I knew about MMA, but I didn't. But like I said, I did boxing when I was in, and I obviously, I guess I knew Muay Thai was a thing, right? Because they mention it all the time in.
it just didn't
Uh,
pop up as prominent, like, they didn't ring the light bulb like I have to devote more of my priority to this.
no, and like I knew I had to obviously learn how to strike, but I didn't really know how to go about that properly either. Probably, uh, but like he's the one also who he like knew about Tiger Muay Thai and Phuket Top Team and like all of these camps in Thailand that I ended up going to. So he showed me, traditional Muay Thai, but he also exposed me to the fact that there were camps over there that you could just sign up for and go to.
All right, let's go with a brief description of your time over there. There are different camps, any fights, things like that. Maybe some individual experiences, stuff that you really remember.
Yeah, I mean,
So you fly over there.
fly over there, one way ticket, hop off the plane, and try to just like I wrote down the address on a piece of paper to show it to the taxi driver, and
Did you draw out the
he had no
symbols?
idea. Yeah, no, no, not the symbols, not like in English, right? And he had obviously he can't read English, so he's like, I have no idea what this is. So find some random guy in the airport who could like help me translate like where I was trying to go.
Damn.
Uh, and then just showed up. But like once you're at the camp and stuff, everybody speaks English, and it's all tourists on that street, at Fighter Road. So
Oh yeah.
I went to
I
Phuket
know
Top
the
Team.
listeners won't know that I listen to this. So
True, true. So it's basically like there's I don't know, when I was there was 3 or 4 fight camps all on the same street with a bunch of hotels, restaurants, stores that sell fight gear, uh nutritional shops, gyms, like all of these on one street that caters to, fight tourism. So I had no idea it was going to be like that when I got there, but um, it makes it very easy once you're there, which is good, and it's good and bad. You don't get the full immersive Thailand experience when everything is sort of catered to you. So, but it also like for someone like me going by myself, speaking no Thai, like it's definitely made it easy. So, uh, got there, just hopped into training right away,
were
man.
there many Americans there?
No, not when I was there. I got there in the low season, and there was no other Americans.
Yeah, because I don't know, because I haven't seen, when I went, I didn't see many Americans there, just a couple. But tons of Australian, British, all kinds of other English speaking people. So it's like it's interesting to me that how prominent the rest of the world is in that location as far as vacations, and like go to England, and kickboxing is pretty popular as well, and all across Europe, but not so much in the U.S. So
No,
I wonder if it's just a timing thing. I'm sure there's some historical value linkage throughout the whole thing, but yeah, I never even got into it until later on. But yeah, I don't know. I just always found that interesting. Why are Americans so isolated and they don't know about the little martial arts and little spots of the world until later
yeah, I
on
mean,
in their life? Like,
yeah, like if I didn't know that, that one guy, if I didn't meet that roommate, then I would have never known about these camps over there and even, traditional Muay Thai. I guess I mean Americans are just into different sports, Like boxing is traditionally the combat sport. Nowadays, I'm sure a lot more Americans know about
it's
Muay
it's
Thai
getting
these
there. I think
days
it's just
in
an
Thailand.
exposure thing.
Yeah.
Like,
But you're just, it's not something that you see on TV. So, I mean, not that, I mean, I don't really watch TV anymore, but, growing up, you watched TV, ESPN, Sports Center. You never really see Muay Thai or kickboxing. That being said, I think one championship actually is probably gonna start exposing more people to
I
Muay
think so
Thai
too. You
and
saw that last card too, the Prime one, the first one on
kickboxing because they
Amazon.
do those mixed events.
Yeah, yeah. Now they're in a
Yeah,
very
I
big
did.
market for the U.S., so it's only going to mean goodness for the U.S. as far as fighter market and exposure.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, a few good fights on there, but it's still interesting to see the little gloves doing Muay Thai, and I wanna interview one of those fighters just to see how they feel about it. You know, the really popular guys. Eventually,
Yeah,
if I ever see him in a camp, just to say like, were you scared to make that transition to little gloves? Because I know me and you, we kind of started with the MMA gloves, or you did Muay Thai before you did MMA, but
yeah,
yeah, it's just a difference. Smaller glove.
yeah. Big difference. But I mean, my fighting style defensively was never really like shell up anyway. So
You
I,
put on the best fights.
I feel like the transition, between the two gloves, is not that hard for me because like my fighting style is not really. I don't really, do a high guard and shell up and stand in the pocket and block punches.
How,
So,
how would you describe your style?
um,
I mean, obviously everything changes. You know, you'll try a different strategy, but overall, you say you don't rely on like a high guard, so you're not very block heavy, I suppose. So do you do
no, I would
cater to
say
the
like
range or head movement?
range. Like I feel like my best attribute as a fighter was always like my judgment of distance. Like I feel like I have long arms, pretty good at kicking, especially like front kicks and leg kicks. So I was always pretty good at sort of hovering around what I know my range is, and like knowing how to just stay out of my opponent's range, so I can sort of like float in and out of that range and land jabs and leg kicks. I remember like the same roommate I was just telling you about when we were like watching fights and studying like all right, how do you like what does it take, like what style is the best style of fighting, right? Or what style can we learn to learn how to be a good effective fighter the quickest? And the the answer was like jabs and leg kicks, right? We watched GSP and it just sort of like made sense, right? And that sort of became my fighting style, I guess, was just like use jabs, use leg kicks, and then as I got better at fighting, I added more tools to it, obviously. But basically, when I started, I didn't even have the flexibility to throw kicks other than leg kicks. Almost the whole time I was in Thailand until I had been in Thailand probably for like 6 months and was throwing kicks every day. So
Just
it was just all jabs and leg kicks,
so to say, what's the secret to flexibility? Please pass it on.
kicking,
Just
kicking over and over and over again. That's it, and that's what I tell. I mean, you can stretch all you want, but you just have to throw these kicks because
hold on.
part of throwing a head kick is not even flexibility. It's like go ahead, yeah.
I lost you for like a second there, but it's fine.
All
You're
right, my
you're,
bad.
you're good now.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just saying like just throwing kicks over and over and over again because part of part of being able to throw a head kick isn't even like about flexibility. It's about having like the body dynamics and the proper technique so that you're getting up on your toes of your front foot, and you're pivoting and like your head is getting offline and you're swinging that front arm as a counterweight and you're like using your momentum to whip that leg around. So, like a huge part of, as you know, a huge part of throwing high kicks isn't even how flexible you are.
It's
So just
body
throwing kicks
positioning and
over and
angle.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I do have another question that I never thought anybody would ever kind of breach that subject, but so I'm very curious because you kind of started with boxing and jiu-jitsu, but then you got really attached to Muay Thai but more specifically kicks. You modified your style around good kicks. So I always wondered, what do you think? Like everybody has a style or like some sort of way to fight that they kind of gravitate to. Do you think that is created by their physical attributes, their mental, or is it just something they're exposed to at the right time? Like how does that come about? Like what do you think?
Probably all three. And like when I teach my students like about developing a style and like how to create their own fighting style, I generally stress, body type one, and then like temperament as well, like natural aggressiveness versus like are you just naturally gravitate towards counter fighting.
Like, do
I
you
mean,
like
I feel like I started kicking a lot just because like I was in Thailand and was just kicking a lot, right? Like when they hold pads for you in Thailand, you're throwing, I don't know, 100 kicks a day or more or with each leg. So
there's
I
something
just
beautiful about a kick, just full body rotation, feeling that shin just slap. It's like I don't know. I agree. I don't know. Kicks are
yeah,
just awesome.
it's a devastating weapon, and you don't really have to expose yourself to that much danger to like throw a hard body kick. You can, and a kick it's still gonna hurt even if they block it. It's one of the as opposed to a punch. So, and you can just throw that leg as hard as you want, and whether it slams on their arms, slams on their legs,
It's
slams even
gonna
if they check
damage
you, slams on
regardless.
their shin, like yeah, you're doing damage with it. So yeah, like you said, it just feels good to throw a hard kick and have it hit the target. It feels bad when you hit your foot, but
Let's touch up on coaching for a second, since you were talking about things you would tell your students. What do you think, from your knowledge? What do you think a lot of people get wrong in the coaching world?
I mean the biggest to me, uh,
Where are they
I guess
spending most of their time that they shouldn't, or vice versa?
two two things come to mind, and one is like pre-rehearsed combos a little bit too much, uh, versus like letting the fighters like instead like I try to like create a scenario and give potential options within that scenario so that the fighter can kind of explore what works for their style and their physical attributes, and they can also like be creative, and there's a little bit more, it's still the scenarios are controlled enough where it's not just a free for all and don't know what to focus on, but you also give them enough flexibility to experiment within that, because that's what you're doing when you're fighting. You got to like find what works and within that real time. So I feel like the pre-programmed combos on the pads a little bit too much is kind of just, you learn to throw these combos, but
At what?
you're not really
When?
learning. Yeah, what? Yeah.
At what?
So
What
that's part of it.
timing? All that.
Right, and the person that you're throwing these combos on is letting you hit them. So like this, most of the scenarios I create are like, okay, one person on offense, one person on defense, and the person on offense is focusing on a concept or a certain. Mostly it's concepts, right, that I'm trying to get them to get, and then it honestly goes for the same thing on defense as well. Uh, and so you have to sort of figure it out based on the scenarios that I give each person. So, like, for example, the defensive fighter, I'll tell them, all right, like, you're trying to be evasive this round, right? You're trying to elude the guy coming at you and make him miss. Or I'll tell them, like, hey, I want you just to try to hold your ground and see the strikes coming at you and
I
react to
like
each one
that a lot.
individually with checks, blocks, etc. Right? Force them to be put into a defensive scenario and figure out how to make it work when they don't know what's going to be coming at them. But at the same time, they kind of do know what's coming at them, because I'll give a scenario like the offensive fighter. I want you to, uh, I want you to throw kick, punch, kick. Right? You can either throw a single strike or you can throw a three-strike combo, but it has to go kick, punch, kick if you throw a three-strike combo. So
You're giving
they have
them
to figure.
scenarios to work through so they can explore, like you said, the concept of an attack, but in different scenarios. You give them parameters, pretty much.
Exactly, exactly. And most of the scenarios that I try to create are not as specific as the one I just listed. Like what I'm trying to get right now, what I'm focused on is trying to get guys to like understand the subtleties of rhythm. It's like, when you're on offense and you transfer your weight to your front foot, like anytime you want to strike, throw a hard strike, you're going to have to transfer that weight to your front foot. And so a seasoned defender is going to understand that, and when they see you transfer that weight, they have to respect that and give some sort of a reaction. So now on the offensive end, we can see that and start to take advantage of that and use that, incorporate that little weight transfer into our rhythm. Uh,
Right.
so when we move around, we're occasionally shifting that weight to the front leg, and then there are even subtleties to the cadence with which we shift that weight. We can shift that weight slow and pause in that position for a minute, or we can make that shift quickly and act as if we were about to explode, or we can go slow, pause for a split second, and then go off of it. So like there's the subtleties of moving with rhythm and then breaking your cadence within that rhythm to catch your opponent off guard.
Right.
Things like that, and those, like, a lot of times that concept is too advanced for a lot of people in my class, but they understand parts of it, right? And then as they get better, they can start to see it more and more.
Right.
But and then within that scenario, I let them, like, you just try to focus on this scenario, but whatever strikes you want to throw off of that, just figure out what works for you.
It's a good concept because you could use it as, like you said, with feints. Yeah, a seasoned striker. As soon as you put weight distribution in a different form, they know certain strikes are going to come. So you can do that as a feint to get their reaction, and then follow up the rest of your combo. I mean, there's tons of room there. That's a good concept. I'm gonna have to steal that from you.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of worked on that concept for a while, but then, to be honest, like last when we talked about studying Nong O for a little bit, I went and watched some of his fights, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is what traditional Muay Thai fighters do, right? Because in MMA, there's a lot more going on. There's like level changes, there's in and out fakes. So you don't have to be as precise with like the rhythm and the cadence. But in Muay Thai, you're kind of just standing in front of each other. So it's like, what separates a good fighter who's able to land strikes in that position from one who's like not quite as sharp? And
Control of the rhythm and the
it's like,
cadence, understanding it
exactly.
to a masterful level.
Exactly. And so that's sort of there's more going on in MMA, so they don't have to necessarily master that rhythm to the same level. And so when we talked about, so that's what I was teaching last week anyway, just because I was watching Nong O just to see like, what is he doing that like is separating him from these people that he's beating?
It's that breakdown. He can initiate his intention, like whether it be a hard combo or whatever, from like any point of his rhythm. He sets a false
Right.
rhythm, he catches them in their rhythm, and he's got it so perfectly intertwined that he could choose
Right.
between the two. He's a master at it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then he can throw multiple strikes like mechanically. The way that he shifts his weight
Oh,
allows
you
him
saw that
to throw
too.
multiple strikes from a position. Right, exactly. So he'll get heavy on that front foot, and then he can throw that right hand off of it, or he can throw that kick off of it, and that kick can go high, it can go, or it can go low. So it's you when he makes that initial movement, it's like all it is a weight shift, but you have to give it so much respect. But he's doing that weight shift over and over and over again, so they're getting desensitized to it because you can't give it respect, the same respect anyway, every single time he does it. Otherwise, you're flinching and you're twitching, and like your nervous system is just, you can't be on edge that whole time. There has to be some like relaxation in your rhythm when you're fighting, which he has, and he can control that by exactly what we just talked
I,
about.
I wonder, it's so hard to tell. I'll never get a chance to interview that guy, obviously, because I don't even know if he speaks English or if I'll ever be over
Yeah,
there to
yeah.
get that. But anyway, so it's hard to say with those guys if it's a learned skill from a certain trainer, or it's something they picked up over time. Chances with him having like over 300 fights, it's just through training for decades nonstop. He's probably just figured it out bit by bit every round of sparring. Stuff what works. He's hit every end of the spectrum and hit every combination with every little block of rhythm change, everything. So
Yeah, I would think that. I mean, honestly, yeah, who knows, right? We, like you said, we'll never be able to talk to him to find out. But based on my experience in Thailand, and maybe it's because there's a language barrier when I was there, but they're not really teaching you that kind of stuff. you're training and watching what they do when they fight and figuring out what they're doing when they spar against you, that is making, so it's sort of just figuring all that stuff out on your own based on what you're seeing around you and how you're seeing
It's
other
an
fighters
interesting
have success.
subject, because that's something I've been thinking about for years. Is it better to take that route? Like, they definitely have an efficient route for giving you time and scenarios to test through repetition, right? They're not sitting there teaching you, but they have the day to day and the scenarios both in fighting, like the actual competition is so often and the training is so often. They made an efficient way for you to explore as much of that as you possibly can in a short amount of time. So I wonder, that's what they're banking on, because somebody that understands the ins and outs and gets rid of doubt on what's work and what doesn't is a better fighter than somebody that just gets told to do this scenario. And I feel like for those people, like you were talking about with the pads, throwing one combo over and over again, just doing basic pad work and not really explaining when or where and how, how to use this thing. I feel like you end up in that kind of scenario sometimes when people just tell you, hey, do this combo because it's good for this. Like, I need a little bit more context and understanding of this move to use it effectively. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah, like, I mean, hitting, like, yeah, like you said, hitting pads, like, it becomes this mechanical thing after a while. Like, okay, you're going to do this combo, but then, like, mechanically, your body can do that combo, but that doesn't, like, I've been able to, any combo that someone teaches me, if you give me enough reps, I'm going to be able to rep it out mechanically, but very few combos that people have taught me I actually have been able to pull off in fights or actually do in fights, right? It's just not the way I conceptualize fighting. So I'm sure there's some people who, like, you teach them things mechanically and then they just go execute those things when they're in there. But that, I mean, the fight is always like a little bit more free flowing for me. And I never really go throw preset combos or anything when I'm out there. It's sort of just like poking and prodding and playing with the rhythm and the distance until I find strikes that start working, and then I'll just keep going to those. Once something starts working, I'll just keep going to it over and over again until they figure out a way to stop it, and then rinse and repeat.
Right. I don't think somebody that just knows 3 or 4 good combos, which is a lot of people, there's like, all right, let's say maybe 10 different scenarios where they're going to be okay. But the system you're describing, or just general conceptual nature of fighting that you're describing, is completely malleable. Like, if something doesn't work, you move on to the next, you change it in a certain form. And so, I mean, you constantly have an answer for everything. Maybe not right then, but within a move, you've pretty much figured out, let's go to the next thing that doesn't work, or vice versa. You said, I found something that worked, so I'm going to use it until he decides to defend it properly. And then you're not going to waste time. You go back to something else. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm just babbling now, but
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree. And I mean, there's positives, and I mean, everything has its trade offs, right? Because like, there's certainly been scenarios in fighting where, like, I could have let a longer series of strikes go, or like maybe a preset combo at that moment would have been what I needed to, like, get aggressive and really, like, damage my opponent when they're already sort of on the back foot. And I don't really go for that because I'm always like poking and prodding and seeing where those openings are, when, like, maybe there's times when, if I just let a 5-strike combo that's preset go, like, I could have hurt my opponent there. So I think there's a middle ground, but I think in general, that kind of goes back to what you were just saying too, which is like, which style is better of teaching or training. And I mean, I think that if you have a lifetime to train a martial art, then you can go the Thai route. Like, the really good Thai fighters are starting when they're kids and they're having 300 fights, and they're probably not really going to school. They're certainly not going to, like, college.
mm-hmm.
So, like, you can go that route if you have a lifetime to dedicate to an art. But I feel like it's more efficient. Like, you could also do that same route, but, like, guide it a little bit along the way. Like, give concepts along the way to try to figure out. And really that's what I've been trying to do in my classes more so now is like, set up drills that allow people to explore certain concepts, and if they figure it out, I mean, good. If they don't figure it out, just, do your best. You're not there yet, It's hard when you have people of all different skill levels, so sometimes the concepts are probably too high level for some people.
Right.
And
And the concepts could change over time. I can recall, seeing a certain, concept from a certain view. I always like to describe it with like colored goggles, like a different colored hue. Like as a beginner, the first time through, as I saw this coach teaching this thing, I saw it from a green perspective, just figuratively. And then, later on in professional career, I saw the same thing, but I'm looking at it through a whole different light. It
yeah,
it's a different use to me now. Like that guy next to me who's second day, he's looking at it like, oh, that's cool. I can use it for this scenario. When in my head, I'm like, yeah, it can work for that, but it can also work for this, this, and this, and this. You get your perspective changes over time. So, I mean, even if they don't get it then, they'll get it eventually, I suppose. Or
yeah,
it'll change completely. Who knows?
yeah. I mean, and that's no, you're right, and that's sort of it's similar to something I learned when I first started learning jujitsu, which is that like the way my instructor broke it down was like you sort of learn moves to learn concepts, and then like once you understand concepts you can apply those throughout all the different scenarios.
Wow,
So like,
that's good. That's a good little genius.
yeah, and I think that's exactly what we're talking about is like fighting is, I mean, in some sense it's moves, but more than that it's like the moves teach you the concepts, and then you have to like apply those concepts while you're fighting to figure out how to win.
Right. Which is why I'll take the 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 transitional mind over use these three moves and button mash them. You know
Right.
but I guess it comes down to personal at that point. It's what you want to do, and any style can work. Anything's got pros, anything's got cons. You just gotta use them. I am gonna touch upon coaching again briefly. We talked about like the different way to train people. Because we don't know who could be listening to this. So I guess when you go to some sort of gym, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this well, but there's several types of people that you train as a coach, right? You have your fighters. You have your fighters that are there, like you said, in the tie wave till the end of time. That's the only thing they're focused on. They could be professionals. You have your amateur fighters, which still have day jobs from day to day. And then you have your casual students who could just, they're just trying to learn something new, like a new hobby, and getting by while getting a bit of fitness. And then I guess on the other end of the spectrum, you have your kick fit, like fitness classes, which are not really trying to learn anything. They're just trying to get a workout in. So did I leave any out as far as on that spectrum of why people would use martial arts? And I guess I'm babbling in this case, but do you think that's the question? There it is right there. Do you think the style of coaching and training differs from each of those?
Yes and no. I think that for part of this too is like I'm a part-time coach. So, I mean, as are we both.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I was if I was like going to become a full-time coach and dedicate, my life to creating the top fighters, then I would, or even just running a gym, right? Whether it's creating the top fighters or just trying to run a gym, I would definitely have a separate class for once you sort of get to the level where you want to fight. And that doesn't mean that you can't go to the other class and learn at that other class, but once you get to the level where you want to fight, there's a different expectation of training that's like placed upon you, and there's a different like seriousness of training. That being said, I kind of because I'm only teaching part time, the way I structure my classes is in a way that hopefully, and I think it does. Like, I mean, I get a lot of compliments on my classes and on my teaching, so I think I do a pretty good job of structuring the class in a way that benefits everyone and is enjoyable for everyone. And so, what I've been doing a lot recently is like when I start the class, like we talked about, I want to build on concepts, right? But when I start the class, I'll start with something that's a little bit more preset so that I can, I'll teach technique, emphasize the proper technique behind whatever we're doing. But I'll structure a drill that is sort of like to warm up, but also help you work on your coordination. So, for example, like we'll go back and forth one for one. I want you to throw any punch you want, any kick you want, but I want you to use your opposite hand and your opposite leg, right? We'll go back and I'll give a couple examples, right? Because there's people who are new and have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm like, all right, I can throw a lead hook low kick, or I can throw a lead hook head kick, or I can throw a cross to a switch kick, right? And I'll let them throw whatever combo you want, and I'll give them a couple examples that they can throw, but just a drill that sort of warms up your body and like programs the coordination that you need to be able to throw strikes. And then from there, I'll progress and I'll start to progress through the drill to where now it's like, okay, now one person, you're going to do the same drill, but now one person is actually defending these strikes. And now, like we talked about, now we're going to do this, we're going to progress further to where uh, after you defend, if you see an opportunity, you can counterattack with the same strikes, like with the same concept in mind, opposite hand, opposite leg. Um, so it's just like it's starting with something simple that is going to show you something mechanically that maybe you haven't thought of. So, and I'll sort of break down the ideas behind why certain combinations like this work. So, for example, with like a jab leg kick, it's like I'm attacking the highest point of my opponent and the lowest point. And a lot of times, if you throw a jab, if guys are prone to use head movement to defend, then when you're moving your head, you're heavy on your legs. And also, when you throw that jab, you're also sort of obscuring their vision. So there's a lot of reasons that those two strikes are synergistic, and not to mention the fact that when you throw the jab, you're sort of loading your body to be ready to throw a leg kick. So I'll discuss concepts like that and go through a few different strikes that they can throw in case they have no idea. But guys who are more experienced, they can start to get creative with it. And I mean, I just set the parameters, right? Opposite hand, opposite leg, throw any two strikes that you want. Uh, and then from there, I progress and I progress and I progress in order to get to the point where the drill or the drill, I guess, becomes more free flowing and creative to the point where a lot of times it ends up like, okay, nobody's on offense, nobody's on defense. You're basically sparring, but I'm giving you very specific parameters. And as long as people are partnered up with someone that they feel comfortable doing that with, then even like the most like hobby, like I've got women, middle-aged women in my classes. I've got guys in their 60s or older, and they can handle these drills as no problem, and they seem to really enjoy it. Not only like can handle it, but they seem to like really enjoy feeling like they get the opportunity to fight without the risk of like having to actually fight. um
Wow, sounds like you've kind of found the balance of everything. They're both physically, they're getting work in, mentally, they're all intrigued, especially for like you said, like the novice section. They're building off of a simple concept and just strengthening the overall concept. But as far as mechanical, you're building off of it throughout the class. So if they start with the jab, they're using the jab to start the rest of the progression. So yeah, a novice can go in there, and by the end of the class, they can throw a pretty advanced combo with practicing that concept the whole time mentally. Like that's wow, yeah, that's a good, that covers most of the spectrum there. Yeah, I like it.
yeah, I mean, the only and then also like, as you know, as we all know, like when you're actually flowing with someone, it's tiring, man. So like it covers the cardio aspect of it as well. Like people are sweaty and they feel like they've been in a fight without having to actually be in a fight. And I think even that kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier with like the ties doing the repetitions over and over and over again. It's because of the playful nature of their sparring, right? So like even so I work us up to this point, like, people are partnered with someone they feel comfortable with, and then I work us up to a level where you're sort of flowing back and forth with each other, or even just free sparring, but with very specific concepts in mind, and also like putting the emphasis on keeping it playful, and because I teach defensive concepts to like uh in addition to the offensive concept that I'm teaching, both people sort of you have multiple things to work on as you're going through it, because like a lot of times, when I just teach an offensive concept and then I sort of let people go and free flow with it, it sort of turns into like whoever's the most aggressive is just going to keep attacking, and then the other person isn't getting a chance to practice it. But if I'm teaching an offensive concept and sort of a defensive concept, even if the defensive concept is like super vague, or not vague but broad, like I just want you to try to be evasive this round, right? Or I just want you to stay in the pocket defensively this round, then even if the person is like naturally inclined to be more aggressive, they still can take a step back and be like, okay, I need to be working on this defensive concept as well. And it's like, as long as it's playful, and I try to emphasize that a lot as well, then people come out of the class feeling like they actually fought, feeling like they learned how to fight, and feeling like they got a workout. So even advanced people, they're, as long as they're partnered with an advanced person, they're getting a lot out of it too. And I feel like beginners get a lot out of it. So of
Okay.
course, like I was saying though, like if if I would, so that's like, because I teach 2 classes a week, I'm trying to compact like learning how to fight into two sessions a week, which is, if I was teaching 12 classes a week, I may do things a little bit differently because I've got more time to compartmentalize the different segments of
I guess
fighting.
you also have to think it's 2 classes a week at a certain time because it's a gym that's catering to, the masses. And in our country, basic 9 to 5s, they only have so much time they can train. So you're kind of developing those parameters based on, you're only given an hour, hour and a half. And,
Right.
this is the type of customers you're dealing with. So you have to kind of take those variables and design a class accordingly, which I think you've done a marvelous job on that one.
Thanks,
Um,
man.
so, and then I guess the other end of the spectrum, we don't really have to put too much time in. The people that are not interested in martial arts training, which I always say they're not interested because they don't understand that they want to know. But
Right.
right, like anybody that gets hooked on it, and they always want to learn more and more and more, and they keep showing up. They show up originally for the workout, but then they realize, wow, this is mentally stimulating too, and I can learn how to fight. I might as well knock out those two birds with one stone, having fun, learning a skill, and getting those calories off. So anyway, the other end of the spectrum is just basic kick fit, which you're just burning calories the whole hour in a hopefully a fun fashion. But I do have another question for the people that are on the other end of that spectrum, the professional fighters that should be training. Is that, 1 hour a day or a couple days a week in that scenario, is that good enough for them, or should they be training in a little bit different way?
Well, I think it's a nice. They should be training in a different way. Just to like answer the question off top, I think they need to be. I think they can be training in that way, but they also need to be
They need other
training in
things.
a
Yeah.
lot of other ways as well, right? So like my class, like Will comes to my class still, and I have a lot of amateur fighters who come to my class, and I tell them like, I mean, it's kind of the way I structure my classes. Like we're working hard, but we're also, it's like it's a little bit more chill and laid back, like a little bit more Thai style vibe of the class. Like I'm not trying to kill you guys. I'm just trying to set up these scenarios and let you flow through it and be creative. And how hard you work in the class is really going to be dictated by how hard you and your partner feel like working, uh, which is great for guys who, if you're a pro, you certainly need sessions like that, because every session can't just be a grind that you fucking hate it. Otherwise, where you're going to lose the passion for it. So it's nice for, I think it's that type of a class is great for, like, we're learning skills, you're getting a chance to be creative, and you're flow sparring. And obviously, there's a lot of utility and benefit from sparring lightly. I mean, Conor McGregor talked about that when he was coming up, but even more so than that, like the Thais have been doing that for. I mean, that's like their methodology, and that's why
Like
they can train as much as they
hundreds, if
do.
not thousands of years. Like just
Exactly.
forever.
Exactly. So it's I think pros can get a lot of utility out of doing training that way, but you also need to do training sessions that suck and that you hate
I
to
agree.
like
Look,
develop that mental toughness and that's yeah, just going through the grind is there's some amount of that you need to do, and
I guess it
also like
changes from time to
compressed
time
sparring.
too, depending on your camp or where it's at and things like that. I would mostly wanted to bring up the subject just to show listeners that, the art showing up to the classes and things like that. Yeah, I mean, this is perfect. The class is absolutely perfect, but on a different end of the spectrum, meaning like the professional side, or, you really want to improve like you did, like going to Thailand, like you have to put in the extra work. That is not enough to get you where you need to go. You need to do the extra. That's a required piece for sure. I agree tenfold. But let's explore some of the concepts of like what else do you need besides that if you really are going to commit to competing into the fighting realm. Like, what are some things that you need on in addition to that you think?
I think you need hard sparring where somebody is trying to hurt you. And I don't think that's something that you necessarily need all throughout your career, but if you haven't, like, you need to feel that hard sparring where someone is coming at you with like bad intent. And even if it's your friend and you know that they're not really gonna like put on the gas to take your head off, like they still have to be throwing hard
You
and
have to get
like
hit
with
hard and
dangerous
potential
intent.
for damage and potential getting knocked out because that's the realm you're getting into. That's the job you want. So you have to experience it at some point for a while.
Yeah, you can't. The first time you experience that can't be when you step into the ring. Otherwise, you're just gonna be not prepared for it. So you need that. You need.
Yeah, I guess it's sports dependent as well. If I'm getting ready for a jiu-jitsu competition or a kickboxing fight or mixed martial arts, like I guess it's all going to be different on what I have to be involved in. I guess tailored
True.
tailored in a certain way. Like if I'm about to do a jiu-jitsu competition grappling, I'm not going to spend 99% of my time hitting a heavy bag, you know.
Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah. True. I think there's a physical conditioning aspect also that you need to be doing. Uh,
So skill work, which could be various types of skill work, and then sparring, the actual like competition esque, testing yourself and seeing where your weaknesses and strengths are, and then you're saying a physical side.
yeah, a physical conditioning side, which it involves building up the different types of energy systems that your body is going to use in a fighting scenario. So, I mean, that can involve like swimming, running, jump roping to sort of build up your lung capacity and like
So what are
your
some of the
aerobic conditioning.
what are some of the pieces at play? You said like lungs and aerobic capacity. Like while you were working on your physique, getting your body, the machine that is your body, ready to do fighting, like what are some of the different categories to think about?
I would say like so like we talked like lungs and aerobic capacity, and those you're sort of training the same way with like steady state cardio. Uh like a and I think there's a lot of methodologies to how you train those, but when I was like I always found the most effective to just be running, and I would try to do like a 5 mile run, and that would take me somewhere around like 35 minutes. So like a 7 minute mile pace. And that like is really hard for me. So like
7 minute miles for 5? Yeah, that's quite a bit.
yeah. But like I knew, and like that was very hard. That was basically me running for 5 miles, basically as fast as I could for 5 miles. Uh, but obviously you're not sprinting, right? Because I can maintain that pace for 5 miles. And if I really wanted to, I probably could have maintained that pace for a couple more miles. But it's hard enough that like I knew I ran hard by the end of it. Like I was and I was it's hard enough that like I was scared before my runs. I'm like, I know this is gonna suck.
This is gonna suck.
Yeah. Uh
I got something similar. I usually do a 5K, which is actually 3 miles. I try to take the timing that it takes for a fight, 15, 20 minutes. And
yeah.
I find what is the maximum pace I can keep for that sustained time, and then I at least know that's my marker.
Yeah, that's good. That's sort of what I would do as the fight got like a little bit closer. So like the beginnings of fight camps, the runs would be a little bit longer, and then I would sort of start to narrow it down
It
to like that
probably
fight time.
helps
Yeah,
with
closer.
adaptation. The longer you spend doing it, the longer, your body will adapt to whatever you want it to do. So you force it to do something, it'll adapt to it. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's a good point that I wasn't really thinking about now. But I remember when I was training hard, that is something that I thought about. Was like, when you do these runs, they get easier and easier, and part of that is just the adaptation. So you need to like be doing different forms of cardio. Another one that I learned, uh, another one that I learned that was really good, and I learned this when I was in Thailand at AKA, was elliptical sprints. So on the elliptical, you do 1 minute at like a high resistance, as hard and as fast as you can, and then 1 minute, and then immediately 1 minute at a low resistance, and you're just sort of like bouncing and pacing yourself. So it's like a recovery minute. You're not going slow, but there's a drastic difference between the sprint portion minute and the recovery minute, and that sort of simulates the firing of those energy systems and then like the bouncy recovery period of a fight. Um, so there's like that's like the steady state cardio and the aerobic, your lung capacity, your aerobic capacity, and then there's like a pure strength component, which would be like doing deadlifts and squats and exercises like that. Which I've never been. I would have never considered myself strong. I could, in terms of like the max weights that I could lift, but I did deadlift when I was fighting regularly and doing jiu-jitsu tournaments regularly. I would make time for deadlifting. I think that's important, like your pure strength, and that's like it's like your muscle strength, but it's also like the strength of your central nervous system
Mm,
to be able to handle like that heavy load on it.
the
So
ligaments and
there's
everything else.
exactly. And then there's muscle endurance, which would be like grabbing some 5 pound dumbbells and holding them at shoulder height. Like, how long can you do that for? Or just like grabbing a 40-pound bar and been repping out on the bench press like 100 reps of just the 40-pound bar as fast as you can. So that's like the muscular endurance component. And then there's the like the plyo explosive component that you need, and that's like for your muscles to be able to fire rapidly and generate like force
Would you tailor all
rapidly.
this towards an MMA kind of lens? Is that what you're going for? A mix of the grapple and the striking?
Yeah, I mean it's just basically the thing about MMA is you're using everything. And that's what's like beautiful about it. So like these are all of the I mean, I'm not an expert. I did personal train for a while and like, he had to get certified for that, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert on all of this. But, my understanding of like human physiology, like these are the different types of energy systems that your body can operate on.
Right. You don't have to get too
And
much in depth. Like, yeah, I mean,
right.
main point of this is, give people clues on what they should be researching, and nobody in any circumstance should just hear something and just do it because so and so did it. Like, listen to for instance, listen to this podcast. You see or hear something you like, dig into it, get some inspiration and see what they're talking about. And as you don't really have to sit here and explain every little detail anyway. Kind of give
Right.
clues
So I
on where
mean,
we're
just
going.
as a recap, it's like cardio, muscle endurance, pure strength, and then like plyometric ability to like explode and generate power rapidly. So there's all different, obviously there's all different exercises you can do to train each of those, but those are like the energy systems that I would train as that are I think are required to train as part of like the regimen if you want to be a professional.
Um, while we're still one last, I have a question from somebody else that they wanted you get your perspective on. What's the best advice for a shorter person fighting a longer person?
I think the two pieces of advice. I always get asked that question because guys, because like Will's in my class and people always have to spar against Will.
How do I beat Will?
Yeah. Uh, One I say is kick the legs, right? Because the leg that's the closest target, and these long guys have long legs, so that target's going to be even closer to you. So just chop the legs. Like don't overcomplicate it. Figure out a way to kick the legs. But then second to that is sometimes you're going to have to close that distance, and when you make the decision that it's like, okay, I'm going to go hit this guy, you kind of just have to commit to it. Like as you get better, you'll understand the rhythm better and you'll see your opportunities to make that attack better. But uh like as a and I don't know what the skill level of the person asking is, but like as you know, you're trying to learn how to do this at first, what you want to do is just commit to it. When you make the decision like, all right, I'm gonna go hit this guy, just like bite down on your mouth guard, charge in fast, and like try to close that gap as quickly as possible.
Right. Well,
uh
why do you have to? I guess you have to close the gap, right? Because they're longer than you. They can reach you where you can't reach them. So the only alternative is to get past their attack range and get to your attack range, right? I mean, there's no other choice. You're trying to hurt him. So I guess
exactly.
you got to commit. You have to.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
and
you're
there's
just
and there's
dancing.
and there's two. I feel like 100% what you said is true, and then I feel like there's two ways to go about that, and one is like to just commit on a blitz, or two is like steady pressure, like a Daniel Cormier style of fighting where you're just gonna like walk the guy down. But that that takes a lot more experience to be able to pull off that style of pressure, just like walking your opponent down.
When to like suddenly stop that pressure because you see an attack coming, but then get right back on that lean pressure. Yeah, I see what you mean there.
Yeah, like I feel like if someone is sort of just learning how to fight against taller guys, if they try that method, you're just going to walk into a lot of punches and kicks. So to me, I sort of like the shorter guys against taller guys. I tell them to like sort of float at the because generally a shorter fighter is has physical attributes that benefit them as well as compared to a tall fighter. Generally, like the shorter fighter is going to be a little bit more mobile, maybe a little bit quicker, maybe a little bit better footwork as compared to someone who's the same weight, but that weight is distributed like into a long lean frame. So like the shorter fighter use those attributes like move around on the outside, chop the leg, and then when you find the opportunity to go, just commit and blitz as fast as you can. Like you make the decision you're gonna go, just go.
What about a boxing perspective? I guess you would skip the leg part, obviously, and just would you try to receive a strike, like block it, and then go in, or would you try a slip, or just try your own just barrage of attacks and hopefully they shell up? Like, what are some of the strategies there? Just boxing.
I I would replace the leg kicks with body jabs. So the
Okay.
strategy to me is the same, but the thing about the body jab is when you enter for the body jab, you're changing your level. So you're keeping your head out of like you're making your head a moving target. So you throw those body jabs, and generally if they're trying to counter strike you, they're gonna miss. They're gonna punch right over you. So you float around the outside, you step in with body jabs, and then when you're ready to, it's the same thing. When you're ready to commit, maybe you double up that body jab and just throw a right hand behind it. Maybe you triple it up, throw two jabs to the body, the third one to the head, and then now hopefully you're in range and you can let those hands go. Uh, but like part of it is the same thing, like understanding rhythm and how to like create a rhythm that will sort of like lull your opponent to stand still for that second and then like breaking that rhythm or that cadence so that you can blitz off of it while they're still not ready to respond with their footwork.
So I'm a new guy, and I understand what you're saying, or at least I think I do, right? So how do I get good at that? Setting different rhythms and seeing how the opponent reacts to it and finding my openings. What would you recommend for me, like training wise? What should I spend a lot of time on just to get better at that?
I would say depending on if you're not learning this in class and you need to learn this on your own, I would say find a mirror and then practice like shadow boxing in the mirror, and you want to uh just like see what your rhythm looks like looking back at you, and you can see like, okay, when I'm moving around, uh and like trying to just like float around the outside and then blitz without a tell that you're gonna blitz.
Right.
Or like it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Like when you're ready to blitz, generally the first thing that's gonna happen is you transfer weight to your front leg. So you want to start shadow boxing and incorporating that
Mm.
weight transfer into your natural movement as you're shadow boxing. And then you can incorporate, okay, now I'm gonna start shadow box, move around, feint that weight transfer, and then blitz off of it. And if you're using a mirror, you can sort of make sure that when you're feinting and when you're actually blitzing, you want those to look as similar as possible, the beginning of it.
Gotcha. That sounds very effective. I thought for sure you were gonna go into like, play a player versus player video game or something like that. See how they react to what you do.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was thinking way too far ahead. All right, one of the last questions here. We're already like an hour in. I mean, we can go as long as we want. I don't care. But okay, competition versus the practice room. Is there a difference?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I figured since you have plenty of fights, like you'd be a good one to touch base on this with. I find there's
Yeah, I
some
mean,
people
I
that think
feel
the
like,
practice room is enough.
yeah, no. I mean, it's enough depending on what your goals are, right? Like, not everybody has the goal to fight or to compete. Uh, but
Right, but the scenario, even in a self defense standpoint, like it's not the same. Like,
no, and that's what, if your goal is to learn martial arts for self-defense and to even if you never want to be a professional fighter or like a compete in fighting regularly, if your goal is to learn martial arts to know how to fight, then you should compete at some point because there is a huge difference. Just,
what's the difference?
I mean, the adrenaline of it, like the pressure of it, like when you're fighting for real, you get hit with like a massive adrenaline dump. And presumably, like it's been a long time since I've been in any type of a street fight, but presumably when you get in a street fight, you're going to have a pretty big adrenaline dump. And if you've only trained with people in like a practice scenario, then you've never experienced the level of adrenaline dump that you get when you compete or when you fight for real. And so your all of your training is going to go right out the window when that adrenaline hits you.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Very well put. All right. The last question I got on my list here. What advice would you give to someone starting in your field? I guess your field in this case would be fighting.
You got to just surround yourself with the right people. Uh, you not you're not going to know what the correct path is. You're not going to know what the correct methods of training are. Everybody has different theories on it. Uh, if you're in a good gym that you feel comfortable with, and there are other fighters in that gym who are progressing and are at the level that you eventually want to be, then and you get along with everyone and it's a good vibe for you and you feel comfortable there and you're not getting beat up all the time and hurt all the time, uh, then you're probably on the right path, and the people around you will help guide that journey. But knowing from coming from personal experience, it's very hard to figure out that path on your own. So put yourself in the environment with the right people.
Well said. Hey, man. Thanks for being on.
Of course, brother. Happy to do it.
All right. See y'all later.
Yep. See you, bro.